So today, lads, we're going to talk a little bit about the World Cup qualification period. So this is obviously starting on March the 11th, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the key players because if you are the Indiana Fever, if you're an Indiana Fever fan, heck, if you're a fan of any team, there are certain players right here that are really, really important. So in this year's draft, there's obviously Awafam. Awafam is the 1A, 1B in this draft. I'm sorry, every time, there's so much, the problem with Awafam is, it's one of those things where I'm like, you watch her play and she is better than her stats. She is better than her stats. Straight up, she is absolutely better than her stats. Like, if you just look at her, just how polished a player she is, like, you can just see the 3-point shooting, the movement, the ability, the extra passes, like everything when it comes down to it with Awafam. Her ability to re-screen, which is rare in women's basketball outside, unless you're like a Leah Boston. There's so many things with Awafam where you're like, holy shit. And this is a good player. And the problem is that you can absolutely say that there are times with Awafam that she kind of takes possessions off, which you can't do at the WNBA level. Like, when games matter, she tends to step up. She does tend to be better in big games. But, that kind of is a big thing. Leila Lacan is one of the best young players in the world. I am very interested in Chekova from Czech Republic or Czechia. Like, I'm very interested in her because she is a young player who is, as far as I'm aware, has already been draft eligible. So she didn't get drafted in 2024. And that is a very key thing. If you can go and pick up her, she's a 6'5" big. She was played over KK Timpson. She's younger than KK Timpson. So she's 2 years younger than KK Timpson. So it's one of those things where if she's available and she's looking to come over, a team might look at her. Zhang Zhu is going to be really interesting at 7'5". She's going to be very, very interesting. Frida Booner has been fantastic. She's been absolutely fantastic. And obviously Malonga is Malonga. But the young player that I'm really interested in, one of the other young players I'm really interested in looking at if I am a Fever player is Elena Buenavida and Pauline Astier. So Pauline Astier is... I'm going to talk a little bit about that again, about these as individual players more in videos. But Pauline Astier is the same age as Caitlin Clark. She's a couple of months younger than Caitlin Clark. But if you've seen the way what she's averaging, she's a starter for USK, averaging 10.2 points per game. She had 17 points in the Super Cup, which was an important one when they played. What was it? Villeneuve, but whoever won the Euro Cup last year, she had 17 points in the Euro Super Cup final, and is a very young player, 5'11" French. She's going to be a key player for the French national team. And then for me, I think a big one, and again, these are free agents you can sign for long-term cheap deals. I think Elena Buenavida is a really key player. Buenavida is 20 years old, and so she's 21 years old. She's averages 5.7 points per game for Spain in Eurobasket, which is 6 points per game. But she averaged 8 points per game in EuroLeague at 21 years old. And again, this is a player who can come over and play right away. I think the Chekova is a very interesting player because she's really young. She's a big born in mid 2004. She's about the same age as Kiki Iriafen. But she's had some really big games, like a 21-point game. Again, the Czech League is obviously doing okay, but even in EuroLeague, she's putting up okay numbers. And she is having some decent enough games in EuroLeague as a 6'5" big who is an important player and somebody that teams need to look at because you have to be on the fringes. With the way this new CBA is, if you are not being able to get players on the margins, if you're not able to find these long-term young players on cheap deals that are playing overseas, if you're not able to do any of this, you're in a really bad spot. I mean, if you're incapable of finding players on the margins, you're actually kind of screwed. I'm going to be real here. If you can't find players on the margins, you're not in a good position when it's all said and done. Like that is really what teams have to do in free agency. And looking at young players in this World Cup qualification period, I think is going to be really important, because this is where you get to see a lot of them playing for their national teams. Because at the end of the day, there aren't that many good like if you're looking at good Americans playing overseas, good young players, there's a couple. There is a couple that have been hooping, and I hate saying this, but Sedona Prince has been kind of hooping. Like Sedona Prince has actually had a pretty good overseas season, but that's one of those things that you really have to be very much keeping an eye on all of this. You need to be keeping an eye on these young players, because there are a lot, like if you are, for a team to be smart, you've got to be on the fringes, or you got to get players kind of on the fringes of coming over or not, and convincing them to come over. That's how the Mercury got to the finals last year. Like the Mercury didn't have the cap space. They literally, after their big three and Wickham, they had to sign everybody else to minimum deals. They did not have the money to pay anyone a cent over a minimum. So what did they do? They convinced Kit Laxa to come over, who was big, by the way. And by the way, if Kit Laxa is willing to play on a minimum, and you're the Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark and you don't sign her, like, could you imagine Katie Lou, except actually can shoot? Like, do you remember the idea of Katie Lou being like, look, you got this lights out shooter, and she actually in the end couldn't shoot? Like, could you imagine like if like you got Katie Lou who could actually shoot? That's what a player like Kit Laxa is. But it's how they got Monica Cole-McCanny, who's one of the best defensive guards in the league. It's how they were able to get Kat Westbeld, Lexi Held. They were finding these players, and it didn't matter. And like people are like, oh, like I'm just saying that because they're not Americans. Like, no, Kat Westbeld and Lexi Held, they're both American players. It's they were recruiting. They were seeing who were doing well. They were seeing what players fit their system. Like a Kat Westbeld can guard bigs and spread the floor. And it's like, that's exactly what you need. Like that's a player the Fever could have really done with. But at the end of the day, didn't happen. Even like I can't remember, was it like there was a couple of other like players that they ended up cutting to Mercury that were really nice. But like if you are like for any of these teams, if you're a fan of whatever team, like you got to be keeping an eye on this, because if you are a fan of a WNBA team, and like the Aces looked out, their roster construction was not good last year. They drafted okay in Leonai, and they then had they traded for Alyssa Smith, and they got really lucky that all the other teams got injured and the Mercury shit the bed. Like the Aces were not beating the Lynx, a healthy Lynx, nor were they beating the Liberty, healthy Liberty. But Fee got injured, Stewie got injured, and yeah, that was pretty much that. Like the Mercury fluked their way to the finals, and honestly, the Aces nearly lost to the Hospital Fever. Like if anyone's being like, oh, the Aces were the best team in the WNBA, no, they literally got brought to like the Aces were Neko Wumake forgetting to box out away from losing in the first round. They were an overtime away from losing to to realistically the equivalent of a WNBA G League team. Like it is what it is. Like the teams that were smartest about this and were able to find all these players and recruited well and looked at who was doing well in different places. Like those teams did the best, and that wasn't the Fever last year. And you're kind of hoping your team does that realistically, no matter who you're a fan of.